This isn't about one bad incident or one rogue agent. A member of Congress just accused DHS of becoming a threat to the very people it claims to protect, and the implications are massive.
Thank you, Congressman. Well, good afternoon. It's a cloudy day. It's 1 week from the horrifying murder that we all saw on video happen in Minnesota. And it is cloudy because we know that we're weeping at what we are seeing happen around the country. You see, for the last year, as Americans watch the violence and indignity on their phones and televisions, they have come to understand what so many of us already know. DHS, as it's operating, is now a threat to every one of us. But I want to be clear. What is happening today in our communities, it's not an accident, and it's not new. DHS immigration agents in many cases are not operating rogue. And I'll tell you why. Because from its establishment, the Department of Homeland Security and ICE has been empowered through a lack of oversight and too much latitude to violate our rights under the pretense of securing our safety. Now, do you feel safe right now? Do you believe that DHS operates with due process? Do you think that they are abiding by the law? Cursing out U.S. citizens, do you think they have respect for the American people? And what you saw on January 7th in Minneapolis is that Americans saw the danger of infusing resources into DHS abuse of power. ICE shot citizen Renee Nicole Good in the face and then called her names. So now we have seen so plainly what DHS can do with its unlimited resources and unchecked power. Funding ICE only fuels our own destruction. We cannot assure our security by sacrificing our humanity, our dignity, or liberty. So what can we do? How do we protect our Constitution? How do we protect our constituents? Well, we have to do three things. One, there has to be consequences for how DHS has abused taxpayer dollars to violate our rights. We must use Congress appropriations power to hold DHS and ICE accountable. Yes, we must oppose new investments, even more money, and demand policy change and reforms. We have to claw back ICE's funding as a natural consequence for DHS's disregard for the rule of law and violations of our rights. Number two, there has to be accountability for every act of violence and lawlessness perpetrated by federal agents on the ground. For every constituent who has been tear gassed, hit with pepper balls, subjected to warrantless arrest and precision immobilization maneuvers. For those that have been kidnapped and disappeared, we must prosecute the criminals in masks. Number three, we must work together as an organized caucus committed to be the opposition party, even as the minority party, to build the pressure and to also build a case so that we can, in fact, impeach Noam and every single fascist leader so they never, ever hold public office again. Look, I called for her resignation back in April. It feels like 100 years ago. And yes, I have called for impeachment before. But Homeland and every member here wants to make sure we go through a process that actually gets us to the outcome we want. And that is why I'm happy to be working with our leaders here today, with the Committee of Judiciary and Oversight, to ensure that our efforts ultimately do, in fact, lead to her removal. Whether it's by resignation, whether it's by termination, or by impeachment. But Kristi Noem has got to go, and we will do everything in our power to ensure it happens as quickly as possible.
What Representative Delia Ramirez is doing here is something we don't often see clearly articulated in congressional hearings. She's naming the system, not just the symptoms. Her argument isn't simply that DHS agents have committed acts of violence. It's that those acts are the predictable outcome of how the Department of Homeland Security was designed, funded, and shielded from accountability over time. That distinction matters because it shifts responsibility away from the idea of rogue agents and toward Congress itself. When Ramirez says this isn't new and it isn't accidental, she's pointing to a post 9/11 framework where extraordinary enforcement powers were normalized in the name of security. DHS and ICE were built with broad discretion, minimal transparency, and an assumption that urgency justifies overreach. Over time, that combination creates a culture where constitutional limits are treated as obstacles rather than guardrails. And this is where her critique becomes uncomfortable for Congress. Because if the problem is structural, then writing bigger checks doesn't fix it. In fact, it worsens it. More funding without reform doesn't produce safety, it produces scale. It expands the reach of the same practices that are already causing harm. Ramirez is also reframing what security actually means. She's asking a question many Americans are now asking themselves. If federal agents can curse at citizens, conduct warrantless arrests, and deploy force with little consequence, who exactly is being protected? Security that requires sacrificing due process isn't security. It's instability backed by power. Her call to use Congress's appropriations authority is especially significant. Funding is one of the few real levers Congress has over executive agencies. When lawmakers continue to fund DHS while condemning its actions, they create a contradiction that the agency easily ignores. Ramirez is arguing that accountability has to be material, not rhetorical. If rights are violated, budgets should reflect that reality. The most controversial part of her remarks, the call for impeachment or removal, isn't just about Kristi Noem as an individual, it's about precedent. If leadership can preside over repeated civil rights violations without consequence, then oversight becomes symbolic, and symbolism doesn't stop abuse. What makes this moment resonate is that it connects policy, power, and lived experience. Tear gas, pepper balls, masked arrests, people disappearing into detention systems without explanation. These aren't abstract concerns. They're encounters with the state that leave lasting damage, not just to individuals, but to public trust. Whether you agree with Ramirez's conclusions or not, the underlying question she raises can't be ignored. How much authority should an agency have before democratic oversight actually means something again? If Congress refuses to answer that question, then hearings like this will keep happening, the footage will keep circulating, and the gap between official language and lived reality will only grow wider. If you want analysis that doesn't just replay the clip, but explains what's happening underneath it and why it matters, make sure you subscribe to CapitolLens. And let me know in the comments, should Congress keep funding agencies it admits are violating rights, or is withholding funding the only accountability that actually works?